Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program, and these are tonight's top stories. The Zionist entity brushes off ceasefire calls, ramping up strikes across Gaza and widening its crackdown in the West Bank, drawing global condemnation. Also in our news, Algeria doubles down on water security as President Tebboune inaugurates a major seawater plant, a bold stride toward economic self-sufficiency. Coming up as well, with the army tightening its grip on Khartoum, talks are off the table. The UN warns of a deepening crisis, over 400,000 displaced in 3 months. And later on, Ukraine endorses a 1-month ceasefire, with Moscow signaling openness to dialogue. The US, buoyed by the Saudi-mediated breakthrough, moves to resume military aid even as drone warfare rages on. Welcome back to the details. Kicking our news tonight with the Palestinian file, a fresh wave of deadly aggression. At least 7 Palestinians were killed and several others wounded in a series of Zionist attacks across Gaza Strip. 5 were killed as Zionist shelling struck a gathering near Wadi Gaza, also known as the Netzarim Axis. In Rafah, occupation drone fire claimed 2 more lives, including that of a woman. Elsewhere, another Palestinian was killed overnight during a Zionist raid, while in Khan Yunis, occupation forces opened fire on residential homes, leaving at least 2 people injured. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza has confirmed 4 additional martyrs and 14 injuries within the past 24 hours amid relentless Zionist assaults. Hospitals have also received the bodies of 32 martyrs recovered from across the Strip, pushing the overall death toll to 48,503, with 111,927 wounded to date. Countless victims remain trapped beneath rubble and scattered across the streets as rescue efforts struggle to keep pace with the devastation. In a related development, the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor reports that 445 Palestinians have been killed since the collapse of the ceasefire, the majority in Rafah. In a strongly worded statement, the group accused occupation forces of systematically targeting civilians without provocation, warning of a looming humanitarian catastrophe. It called on the international community to intervene urgently to halt the genocide and the slow, grinding extermination of the Palestinian people.
Israel has killed 145 Palestinians at a rate of 7 people every 2 days since the ceasefire, while using siege and starvation as tools of slow killing within the crime of genocide in the Gaza Strip. We call on all states to assume their legal responsibilities and take urgent action to stop all acts of genocide, compel Israel to lift the siege completely and immediately, and hold it accountable.
On another front, the Zionist occupation has ramped up its violations, cutting off electricity and fuel supplies and forcing water stations offline, further aggravating the escalating thirst crisis. Amid a relentless war of starvation, the situation teeters on the brink of a full-blown health and humanitarian catastrophe. We're on this now with Sofian Kanturi.
Gaza is yet again sinking deeper into humanitarian catastrophe as starvation, thirst and darkness tighten their grip on the war-ravaged enclave. After nearly 17 months of relentless bombardment, blockade and bloodshed, the occupation has decided to cut off electricity and water supplies, plunging an already devastated Gaza into even deeper despair for those who have survived the onslaught.
From the first day of war until today, there is no electricity. It's been a year and a half with no electricity. And today the army says they won't bring electricity and they will cut it off. Electricity has been cut off on us a year and a half. So what will happen if they don't bring it at all? It's normal for us. We live on batteries, flashlights, candles, or anything. We live.
According to experts, the latest violations are aimed at shutting down drinking water desalination plants and crippling sewage systems, sparking a growing humanitarian and environmental disaster across the strip.
كانت قادرة على إنتاج 18,000 كوب يومياً.
The station was capable of producing 18,000 cubic meters daily, and we were supplying this amount to the central region and southern Gaza Strip. Now, since yesterday, the electricity supply to the station has stopped, and consequently, we're able, at our best, to produce only 2,000 cubic meters per day. This means approximately more than an 80% decrease in the produced quantity.
And in Deir al-Balah, the city's mayor Tariq Shaheen says the situation in Gaza is teetering on the edge of a crisis never seen before, with families left without the most basic necessities.
The expected risks from stopping the desalination plant are first, insufficient water reaching citizens, which leads to citizens relying on alternative means that may be contaminated water here or there. This threatens the spread of intestinal or skin diseases and reduced hygiene among citizens. Therefore, we expect that if the closure continues, God forbid, an environmental and health disaster will occur.
And to make matters worse, all of this is happening during the holy month of Ramadan. Despite the declared ceasefire agreement, the occupation continues to block humanitarian aid from entering Gaza, deepening the suffering of Palestinian families during this sacred time. Without swift international action, Gaza is heading toward a health and humanitarian disaster of historic proportions.
Elsewhere in the occupied territories, at dawn on Tuesday, Israeli occupation forces killed 3 Palestinians during a raid in Jenin in the northern occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Ministry of Health confirmed that the bodies are being withheld as occupation troops blocked ambulances denying aid to the wounded. In a chilling escalation, one martyr's body was mutilated and removed by bulldozer, underscoring the gruesome tactics employed on the ground. Still in Jenin, a Palestinian woman was martyred Tuesday morning after being gunned down by occupation forces in Jenin, northern occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society confirmed receiving the body of a 60-year-old woman, later transferred to Jenin Governmental Hospital. Details surrounding the exact time of her martyrdom remain unclear. In a parallel, at least 30 Palestinians, including former detainees, were arrested in a wide-scale raid by Israeli occupation forces across the occupied West Bank. According to the Palestinian Prisoners Club and the Palestinian Authority for Prisoners Affairs, the arrests spanned Al-Khalil, Ramallah, Beit Lahm, Nablus, Tulkarem, and Salfit, and occupied Al-Quds. Meanwhile, the occupation presses on with its weeks-long clampdown in Jenin and Tulkarem, conducting arrests and field interrogations on a near-daily basis. On the diplomatic front, Algeria has welcomed the European Union's commitment to a just and lasting settlement of the Palestinian question, grounded in the two-state solution. Addressing the UN Security Council on Tuesday, Algeria's permanent representative Ammar Ben Jama praised the EU's ongoing efforts to alleviate Palestinian suffering, particularly in war-ravaged Gaza.
Algeria remains deeply concerned about the ongoing situation in the occupied Palestinian territories and the endless suffering of Palestinian civilians. We commend the EU's effort to alleviate this suffering, and we commend its unwavering commitment toward a lasting and just settlement of the Palestinian question in line with the internationally agreed parameters.
Speaking at the same forum, Ambassador Ammar Ben Jama also praised the growing security coordination between the European and African Unions, describing it as a pillar of stability and a catalyst for lasting peace across the region. Let's take a listen again.
Algeria, as an African nation, deeply committed to the principles of multilateralism, recognize the vital role of the European Union in promoting peace and security. The long-standing cooperation between the African Union and the European Union remains a cornerstone of our shared efforts to address conflicts and build sustainable peace.
Turning now to Lebanon. 2 Lebanese nationals were killed in Zionist airstrikes on southern Lebanon, including one in a drone attack on a vehicle near Deir el-Zahrani and another in Wadi Faroun Nabatiyah. The Lebanese civil defense confirmed the fatalities on Tuesday as tensions continue to mount along the southern frontier. President Joseph Aoun called on the ceasefire monitoring committee to press the occupation to end its violations, withdraw from Lebanese territory, and release all detained Lebanese prisoners. Back home now, President Abdelmajid Tebboune on Tuesday inaugurated the Ras Janat 2 seawater desalination plant in Boumerdès, a strategic facility with a daily production capacity of 300,000 cubic meters, set to supply potable water to Boumerdès and surrounding provinces. The high-level ceremony drew senior officials, including Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Army Chief of Staff General Saeed Shangriha and Minister of Energy Mohammed Arqab. President Tebboune hailed seawater desalination as a cornerstone of his development vision aimed at bridging structural deficits and propelling Algeria toward the ranks of emerging and developed economies.
تكون درس بالتقريب يعني حتى الناس اللي ينطلقوا في مشاريع كبرى ضخمة أخرى إن شاء الله، لأن هذه هي المسيرة تاعنا اللي تسطرت من أول وهلة على أساس تدارك العجز في كل الميادين والوصول إلى ركب الدول الناشئة الدول المتقدمة، ورانا في الطريق الصحيح. فشاكر لكل وزارتين بما فيها وزارة الري ووزارة الطاقة، وأعتقد أن انطلاقا من هذه المشاريع راهم هما أسوا مش حنا أسوا لمدرسة جزائرية في إنجاز المشاريع الكبرى إن شاء الله.
President Abdelmajid Tebboune further emphasized that seawater desalination projects were launched to mitigate the impact of dwindling rainfall and declining groundwater reserves. He underlined that Boumerdès, once hindered by stalled development during the 1990s national tragedy, is now witnessing tangible progress, with desalination initiatives forming part of a broader efforts to strengthen infrastructure and improve public services.
إذن هنيئا للمواطن أولا اللي هو الشغل الشاغل تاعنا في تزويد المياه الصالحة للشرب. المنطقة هذه في وقت فات كانت تعاني من نوع من تأخر. ستكون مشاريع أخرى لبومرداس بحول الله إن شاء الله. فخورين 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 بأبنائنا وبناتنا وإطاراتنا.
With the rollout of seawater desalination plants, Algeria is fortifying its water security and consolidating its economic sovereignty while reducing dependency on imports. This strategic push now positions the country as Africa's foremost producer of desalinated water. Here's Zahra Jenny with a report.
With the launch of large-scale seawater desalination plants, Algeria is reshaping its water future and reinforcing its economic sovereignty, cutting all dependency on water imports. From Oran to Tipaza, Ataraf to Boumerdès, the Algerian coastline is now home to a string of cutting-edge desalination facilities. These plants are part of a bold national strategy to confront climate change and ensure long-term access to drinking water.
يعطيكم الصحة متأكدين عليكم. هذه أول مدرسة جزائرية لتحلية مياه البحر. أتمنى تكونوا قدوة للولايات الأخرى إن شاء الله.
This is more than infrastructure. It is a strategic vision brought to life, driven by strong political will and smart investments. In Boumerdès alone, more than 3,000 cubic meters of potable water are produced every single day, a milestone that adds to a growing list of mega projects developed by Algerian hands. And what's more, seawater desalination is no longer a foreign technology. Algerian engineers and experts have mastered it from design to operation, transforming it into a home-ground industry.
هما ثاني خدوا حقهم ils ont participé au miracle ما تقدرش تتكلم على تحلية المياه بدون ما تتكلم على الطاقة. يعني هذه كما قلت très difficile d'exprimer ce qu'on ressent réellement. La fierté à un niveau jamais égalé.
Water security, the president says, is a national commitment, a responsibility towards future generations, and a pillar of Algeria's sovereignty over its natural resources.
هذه هي الطريق اللي اختارته الجزائر. وإن شاء الله يتبعوها مشاريع أخرى وقطاعات أخرى إن شاء الله تدرج فيها.
With these projects gaining momentum, Algeria is confidently charting a path to water independence, resilience, and leadership across the African continent.
Moving on to Sudan now, the Sudanese army has launched a sweeping assault on rapid support forces positions north of Al-Qatina and south of Khartoum state. Local media reported a notable military buildup in Muqran at the heart of the capital as army units seek to cut off RSF supply routes and tighten their grip on Khartoum. Meanwhile, government forces continue to fend off renewed RSF offensive targeting Al-Abyad and Al-Qatina, two key areas recaptured in February, amid escalating clashes across the region. In a defiant speech, Sudan's Transitional Sovereignty Council Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has categorically rejected any negotiation with the Rapid Support Forces, branding them a terrorist militia. Speaking at a military commander's funeral, Burhan declared that dialogue would only follow the RSF surrender or total elimination, not before. He praised the groundswell of popular support for the army, underscoring its pivotal role in safeguarding national unity. The general further asserted that only the Sudanese people hold the mandate to decide the course of peace and political dialogue, not those who seek to fracture the state through force. Meanwhile, the United Nations has raised the alarm over a rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation in Sudan as international aid continues to dwindle. UN Humanitarian Coordinator Clementine Quetta Salami voiced grave concern over major donor funding cuts, warning that life-saving operations hang by a thread. She revealed that while Sudan urgently requires $4.2 billion in humanitarian assistance this year, a meager 6% has been secured so far. This critical shortage, she stressed, jeopardizes the survival of 21 million people already grappling with displacement, hunger, and disease. Without swift global support, the crisis risks spiraling into an irreversible disaster. According to the International Organization for Migration, nearly 400,000 displaced Sudanese have made their way back home over the past 3 months, seeking refuge in areas recently reclaimed by the National Army from the Rapid Support Forces. The report notes that approximately 396,737 returnees have resettled in Sennar State, retaken in December, and Al Jazeera State recovered shortly thereafter. While the return signals a fragile sense of stability, humanitarian agencies warn that conditions remain precarious, with infrastructure shattered and essential services severely strained. Shifting focus to Ukraine, the United States has announced the immediate resumption of intelligence sharing and security assistance to Ukraine following a high-level meeting between Ukrainian and U.S. delegations in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. In exchange, Kiev has agreed to a U.S.-brokered proposal for initial 30-day ceasefire, which could be extended by mutual consent provided Russia accepts and implements it simultaneously. Yasin Urkti reports.
In a major diplomatic turn, the United States is set to resume military aid and intelligence support to Ukraine, following a breakthrough during high-level ceasefire talks held in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Of this positive step forward, the President has decided to lift the pause on aid and on our security assistance to Ukraine going forward, and that's effective immediately.
The meeting came just hours after Ukraine launched its largest drone strike on Moscow, targeting oil infrastructure. Russia claims over 240 drones were intercepted, with at least 3 people killed and airports briefly shut down. Despite tensions on the battlefield, diplomacy took center stage. Kiev offered a 30-day ceasefire, extendable by mutual agreement, but only if Russia agrees to the same terms.
Hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball is now in their court. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
The U.S. side, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, hailed the talks as a step forward, while Ukraine's Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak called the dialogue very constructive.
We really appreciate the leadership of President Trump. We believe that the United States is the country that can do everything today to ensure that this just peace comes. They have these levers.
President Zelensky reiterated that any ceasefire must cover air, land and sea, and stressed the need for real security guarantees, not just a pause that would allow Russia to regroup.
During today's talks, the American side proposed taking a first step forward, establishing a full ceasefire for 30 days, not just ensuring security in the Black Sea, but implementing a complete ceasefire along the entire front line. Ukraine welcomes this proposal. We see it as a positive proposal and are ready to take this step.
I want a ceasefire.
In parallel, a separate deal is in motion, giving the U.S. access to Ukraine's vast rare earth mineral reserves, critical for defense and tech industries.
So this minerals agreement is going to be signed, that it is a framework document. After that, the teams will start working on a more detailed document. Today in their statement, we simply confirmed the intentions of the two sides, the two presidents, to make this really happen.
Washington's decision to unfreeze aid follows last week's heated fallout between Presidents Trump and Zelensky. But insiders say the U.S. is still pushing behind closed doors for broader concessions, possibly even territorial compromises, something Kiev strongly rejects. Meanwhile, in Paris, NATO leaders, excluding the U.S., are exploring a coalition of the willing, led by France and the UK, that could provide peacekeeping troops if a truce is sealed. So while the Jeddah talks rekindle diplomatic hopes, the path to lasting peace remains fraught, tangled in geopolitics, minerals, and missile fire.
And finally, let's get you up to speed with more world stories. Here's the news in brief with Salman Assad.
Uganda announced on Tuesday that it had deployed special forces in Juba, South Sudan's capital, due to growing concerns of civil war after tensions between President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar. Ugandan Army Chief, for his part, warned that any action against Kiir would be seen as a declaration of war, prompting Uganda to send troops to secure the city. In a statement from the White House, Trump revealed that he directed the Secretary of Commerce to implement an additional increase in tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum imports to 50%. Tariffs on imported cars will be imposed starting April 2nd, unless Canada removes its own tariffs. China warned the UK against escalating tensions in the South China Sea after British Foreign Secretary David Lammy criticized China's actions in the region. Lammy expressed concern over the safety of global trade routes, noting that 1/3 of the maritime trade passes through the sea, while China accused him of fueling tensions. Naval exercises between Iran, China and Russia, dubbed 2025 Security Belt, began in Iran. The drills aim to strengthen military trust and cooperation. The Chinese fleet arrived near Chabahar port, and the joint exercises involving Iranian and Russian ships started on Sunday and will last for 5 days.
That brings us to the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, you can always check our social media platforms. Thank you for watching and good night.